Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. I got a World War III alert. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. What a humiliation for Zelensky, the Nazis, and NATO is very, very, very severe. Russia, North Korea finally admit that North Korea helped Russia defeat the Nazis. Salute, family. In Russia, cursed area. Let's get into that. The reason this is very big because the United States made a very tragic mistake by getting in Russia's business in Ukraine, because now they absolutely will never be able to fight North Korea ever again, because this defense alliance with North Korea helping Russia when Russia needed to defeat the Nazis who had invaded their country. North Korea was there. We're going to learn a little bit more about that. This is very strategic. Now, these deals that they made with Iran, probably the same similar thing. Iranians helped Russia with very advanced drones. Russia is showing all of its allies they're going to fight with them also. Very bad news.
First Moscow, now Pyongyang. North Korea has officially confirmed it deployed combat troops to fight alongside Russian forces, marking a historic first since the Korean War. The announcement follows an earlier confirmation by Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov, who on April 26th said North Korean soldiers provided significant assistance and showed professionalism, courage, and heroism in retaking Kursk from Ukrainian forces. Russian President Vladimir Putin also hailed the Kursk operation as a success, though Ukraine disputes the claim, insisting its troops still hold defensive positions in parts of the region.
No, they don't.
North Korea's Central Military Commission said the deployment was ordered under a sweeping mutual defense treaty with Russia signed in June 2024, requiring both nations to aid each other militarily.
What's so big about this? Well, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, has millions of loyal soldiers ready to die whenever he says something, ready to fight on his command. Those loyal, trained, hardcore soldiers who just learned advanced warfare. How did they learn? Because they went and fought with the Russians and kicked NATO's butt. Remember, NATO invaded Russia in the cursed area, and North Korea got some battle-hardened experience. But now Putin has millions of soldiers loyal to this new war against NATO. NATO can't get millions of troops ready to die today. No. This is very, very bad news. Trump should sign a deal immediately with Putin. It can only get worse.
If attacked. Kim Jong-un declared the mission aimed to wipe out Ukrainian neo-Nazi occupiers.
That's right.
And pledged to honor fallen soldiers with a monument in Pyongyang, a rare glorification of overseas combat by the regime. Intelligence estimates suggest 11,000 to 12,000 North Korean troops were sent to Kursk, suffering heavy casualties, including 1,000 losses in December 2024, and an entire battalion lost near Makhnovka in January 2025. Despite their discipline, North Korean forces have been vulnerable to modern drone and artillery attacks, yet have helped Russia overwhelm Ukrainian defenses by sheer troop numbers.
Ain't no Ukrainian defenses, NATO defenses, all kind of NATO people was dying in Russian-held territory. You know, So Putin got one of his homies to send in some troops and help them. See, this is what's good for North Korea. They need to learn how to fight advanced new warfare. There's some Chinese there too, Iranians, everybody they're learning. Burkina, all of the African countries, boy, you better remember when when Ukraine worked with the terrorists in Mali to kill the Malian and Russian soldiers. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger said that the Nazis were in Ukraine and that they were helping terrorists. So now you think that they not over there getting some of that training too? Everybody is finna join this war on NATO. Putin know what he's doing.
Has condemned the North's involvement as a grave provocation.
Also said that he's gonna protect Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. You see? Kim, he don't want to be on the sideline no more. Every time the United States get out of line about some shit around the world, Kim got something to say. Every time NATO disrespected somebody, Kim got something to say. He tired of talking. He fighting now. Bad news for NATO.
Warning that Pyongyang's deepening military ties with Moscow risk destabilizing not just Europe, but Asia too.
I love this for Kim. Kim finally finna get to do what he's been wanting to do his whole life, what he was trained to do, and that's fight NATO. And the U.S. if they try to stick their nose, you see. If the U.S. want to head up, then Kim don't mind fighting the United States. The United States don't got 2 million soldiers ready to go die right now. Don't give a damn about coming home. Kim Jong-un do. Home where the buffalo wrong with them soldiers, man. They ain't tripping. So let's hear more about this historic announcement of North Korea and Russia fighting.
Russia has announced that it has fully liberated Kursk. In a message by General Gerasimov, he said soldiers and officers of the Korean People's Army performed combat tasks shoulder to shoulder with Russian soldiers repelling the Ukrainian invasion. They showed high professionalism, resilience in battle, courage, and heroism. Even though DPRK, North Korea, isn't in BRICS, we know that BRICS has formed an umbrella over the DPRK so that it can survive economically. For so long, we were told that North Korean troops, they're there. And Russia said very little. On the day of liberation, Russia announces this while there are these negotiations with the United States going on. Here's what Donald Trump had to say, Pepe. There's no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities, and towns over the last few days. It makes me think he doesn't want to stop the war, maybe. Just tapping me along. It has to be dealt with differently through banking and secondary sanctions. What's your take on this, given the liberation of Kursk?
This narrative that he's worried about soldiers dying in Russia in Ukraine this way, this is beyond BS. And obviously not a word about Palestinian civilians dying by the tens of thousands, victims of his buddy's genocide. So this is, and the whole global South sees through it. Absolutely. And obviously he doesn't know what's really going on. Russia does not bomb civilian targets. So this is, once again, he's being fed misinformation by silos at the CIA, at Pentagon, his own National Security Council, etc. So it's bullshit, once again. The fact that Trump, as we all know, doesn't read. His attention span is 10 seconds maximum for any issue. He doesn't pay attention to anybody. Very few people actually get his ear. He doesn't follow geopolitics. He doesn't read geopolitics. He doesn't understand geopolitics. He's not a strategist. So it's basically a off-the-cuff intuition here and there, or something that he dreamt at 3 a.m. awake in his bedroom. He tries to turn this into a policy. So it's never a policy because it doesn't have a beginning, and usually they have no end. They are, floating bubbles. So it's very complicated to deal with that. And of course, his compulsion to basically completely dominate the news cycle on a daily basis and preferably on an hourly basis. So the whole news cycle and theoretically the whole diplomatic movement all across the chessboard is always subordinated to something that he said, the most outrageous thing possible, or that he publishes in his social media, and everybody reacts to it. So in terms of controlling the narrative, nobody does it better than him. But that's about it. Controlling the narrative doesn't mean he's controlling geopolitical and geoeconomic processes that are extremely complex and that escape him completely. So that's a completely different thing, you know. So in terms of it's like if you are a one-man band and you have one hit single, and that's it, and then you erase. This was the history of most of pop music so far. That's his case, and he doesn't have a string of hit records at all. He doesn't even know what a hit record is. Otherwise, he wouldn't have listened to his three stooges who sold him on the idea of the tariffs: Navarro, Besant, and Miran. We can call him the Three Stooges now.
People thought the Trump administration was coming in almost like, you know, peace through strength. It was going to reverse things regarding U.S. foreign policy from the Biden era. But from how I see it is that a lot of Trump's approach to all of these questions relating to this war on BRICS, with Russia in particular, maybe you can comment on this, he's taken a softer posture toward Putin and to some degree, and then making threats on others, in my assessment, because what else is he going to do? Russia, through announcing Kursk liberation, made it very clear that it is ready to make even more advances. It's winning. Yeah. And so what else can Trump do? If
there's absolutely zero coherence on anything he says, publishes, and, you know, 10 seconds later, backtracks, you name it. So we should never forget that he's dealing with rational actors. For instance, this blah, blah, blah that he's talking with the Chinese go on the record right away, say, no, it's fake news. He's lying, essentially. The blah, blah, blah about a ceasefire, the Russians don't say anything. The Russians are extremely reticent to react to speculation. They deal with facts and they wait. When there is a fact, Peskov relates the facts. Or in the case of Gerasimov today, he was relating a fact. We liberated Kursk. So anybody that follows he doesn't even to get into the detail to explain to the rest of the world, look, NATO and MI6, they thought that they would use 76,000 now dead Ukrainian soldiers to get a piece of our territory. Look what happened to them. That's the subtext of Gerasimov reading his press release, you know. And Iran, the same thing. Iran said, okay, we can negotiate, but if our rights and our national security is respected. This is essentially what Khamenei wrote in his letter to Trump. But on the other side, what do we have? We have this non-stop circus, literally, you know. So it's extremely difficult to organize a diplomatic environment conducive to practical solutions. It's already a miracle that the indirect negotiations are going on between Iran and the US. So we can give some credit to Witkoff. Very good. As we can give him some credit in terms of his talks with Putin, because Witkoff is a lawyer, Putin's also a lawyer, they can talk legalese. And so they found probably a mechanism to understand each other. And of course, Putin knows that Witkoff is whatever Trump wants to tell him, Putin, he's telling through Witkoff. So that helps as well. But it's not traditional diplomatic negotiation, especially when you know that one of the sides, Trump, he has absolutely no clue about the reasons for the SMO and the background leading to the SMO. Not to mention the Kafkaesque absurdity of the Empire of Chaos, who initiated the war in the first place, now is mediating between Russia and Ukraine to finish the war. It doesn't get more Kafka than that, right? So in terms of a rational geopolitical discussion, we are in a completely different territory. Nobody knows really what this non-stop circus is leading to. Especially because now in foreign policy, he's fighting on three very, very, very complex fronts. And there's no evidence that he can deliver in any of these three. Let's say that the least complex, it's extremely complex, but he would have a chance if, and apparently it's starting to, he's finally admitting that Crimea is Russian. This is an enormous step.
Yeah.
So the next step will be to admit that Donbass is Russian. We're getting there little by little. After that, then okay. So assuming we freeze the whole thing in the line of contact, and the Russians already said, no, we don't want a freeze. We want a long-term solution. Then the real negotiation will start. Revolving around what will be the real status of Ukraine. In Trump's mind, okay, this is like could be light years away. You know, it doesn't think around these terms. He wants a piece of paper saying we got a deal. It's not going to happen, and the Russians already very politely are telling him via Witkoff, no, this is the beginning, and the beginning includes normalizing our relations. Ukraine is just a piece of the enormous puzzle, which is nuclear issues, spheres of influence, you name it. But can you imagine trying to impress this to Trump in 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes? Impossible. And of course, with China, forget it. He blew it from the beginning. Because of his procedure, his non-method, blew the whole thing. And with Iran, he will have to, Witkoff has to tell him, look, if you keep threatening to bomb these guys, these are very rational actors. You know, you're not going to get your deal. Forget it. Especially because they know that you broke the first one. What makes them think that you're not going to break the next one? So he is at a disadvantage in all three of these fronts. And when you add, Danny, which is something that you know well, you are in the US, his internal enemies, then it gets even more complex, the whole thing. So in a sense, after three months, his presidency is already besieged from all sides.
Yeah.
And he doesn't work. He doesn't work well when he's besieged from all sides, as we all know.
So in this plan that has been supposedly leaked, some people call it the Kellogg plan, the plan that says there will be de facto recognition of Crimea, as you said, big step, de jure recognition of Russia's control of the territories in the Donbass. What he's saying now after the Pope's funeral, after he met with Zelensky on the sideline during the Pope's funeral, he's saying that, no, it's absolutely unacceptable that we'll ever recognize the Donbass as part of Russia. So there's always flip-flopping. The significance of the DPRK, Russia, first of all, announcing that they were participating in the Kursk liberation. For me, this was an astounding announcement from Russia that I think really underscores where the world situation is right now and just how important Russia and BRICS and the multipolar world view their partnerships, to the point where we're seeing this is an outright military alliance,
and it's very Russian, Danny. They never advertise these things. All of us are observing. We suspect there's something going on, and then one day they announce that yes, it's happening. But they announced at the last minute when it was already a fait accompli. Yes, we liberated Kursk, and they were North Koreans. Of course, these North Koreans were not in the front lines. Everybody knows that. They were in the back. They were advisors. They were learning, but they were there. So this implies graphically military collaboration in a war front, direct military collaboration between Pyongyang and Moscow. It is enormous. On one hand, it's predictable. If you go to the Vladivostok Forum for the past few years, you knew that a lot of stuff was brewing in terms of closer collaboration between North Korea and Russia. And one of them, military collaboration as well. So now we're seeing some of these results. There'll be others as well. But that's the difference. The Russians don't need to blah, blah, blah. They're very discreet. And when they announce something, something that already happened.
You know, this is a literal State Department think tank headed by Mr. Asher, been in the State Department for years, decades. Our friends in China, Russia, Iran, and China jointly meet ahead of negotiations. And in this, they talk about how this is all about a reminder, along with North Korea, that China, Russia, and Iran are members of an emerging axis of aggressors whose common and collaborative cause is to diminish American power and forge a new global order they seek to dominate. For me to see Russia say that DPRK, yes, was with us in this fight was a strong message, a huge message, I think.
But Danny, these FDD imbeciles, they don't even know what really happened. Russia, China, and Iran sent their representatives at the IAEA to tell Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, now you have to do what you should be doing from the beginning and act like a political and technical liaison to explain to the Americans what should be done if there is a JCPOA 2.0. This is what happened. So to qualify this as axis of aggressors, it doesn't even qualify as stupidity. It's lower than stupidity. Well, what do you expect with from think tanks like that? You know, but of course, from large sectors of the Beltway, the new axis of evil is Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And now, wow, now it's in front of them. So next stop, where? They're going to conquer Berlin again? Or Paris? Oh, gosh. It's too stupid. No. I think I'm getting too old for this.
Yeah. The Trump administration came in and attempted to approach the most important players of BRICS with various means of hostility, with, of course, coercion. Coercion, and even the negotiations. We know with Russia, we know that there's a lot of baiting and switching and attempts to impose certain conditions that are unacceptable to Russia, which is why they've gone the way they've gone, which is they've gone smoothly, but with very little in the way of concrete implementation of any kind of new policy. So all in all, we see that but most concretely with Iran, with Russia, with China, and now Russia, we're seeing this attempt really flail and fail on the part of the new U.S. administration, which for all intents and purposes, while it definitely doesn't look the same, we are seeing this war on BRICS blow back in the face of the United States. Where do you see this going as we move post-Kursk liberation and into the BRICS summit? How do you see Donald Trump's and the United States' overall direction?
It's interesting because this, what's been happening gave me an extra reason to start believing that this BRICS summit could be something really groundbreaking. So coming from China, going to Iran, and then back to Russia before going to Brazil for the summit, I think would be essential to get the big picture among the BRICS, the big BRICS. For the next few days, all of us will have to understand what's really going on between India and Pakistan and who caused that. Of course, we all suspect who caused it, but the implementation was very, very shoddy. And the fact that both India and Pakistan are falling into the trap is also very, very worrying. They're both members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. One of them is a member of BRICS, and one of them has a strategic partnership with China in the Belt and Road. So this is very, very, very serious. But the next 3 months before the summit in Rio, probably they will originate extra headaches for Donald Trump. Because if the Chinese, with their newfound united front mentality, really start working hard to agglutinate the BRICS into a common geoeconomic position. For instance, there have been rumbles from China from yesterday to today about an IMF reform. They haven't talked about this in quite a while. Suddenly, they're back on it all over again. And of course, what they're going to do in terms of counteracting the tariffs. So everything is at play the next 3 months. They will be essential. And we could arrive in Rio in early July in a situation that, okay, now it's clear. It's the sole empire on one side, out of control, against 80% of the global south and the global majority. So the clash will be, frontal. And then we're going to start a new era. For the moment that we are at the interregnum, it could veer any other way. Or Trump could have an excess of rationality. Don't count on it, of course.
Defending our motherland as their own. I see this as two things, as chess move. I see this as there's some symbolism here. I think there's a lot more to this than just a couple of North Korean soldiers wandering around on the battlefield. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. First, there were a couple. And the fact is, since the first time there are those howitzers from North Korea, which happened about half a year ago, maybe even long before that, have been shown. They have been captured by the video. People obviously make videos. You also had 3 of them. It was clear that obviously the crews would be Korean, that there would be some North Korean presence there. And but this is not the main point. The main point why this has been commanded and what is called, had the focus or light on it is strategic. It's not tactical. Obviously, they fought. You can see their photos. Some of them, they wear the Russian gear, obviously, from helmets to all kinds of strelets outfit and all that thing. So it's only natural. The Russians also trained them and tried to and incorporated whatever the tactical unit was there. The significance of that is completely different. Just to give you an example, there is an Anglo-Saxon battalion, no less, in Russian military, in Russian army. These are the guys, these are Americans, Canadians, British guys, New Zealanders, Aussies, who are fighting there, and it was actually disclosed that they fight, but here's the difference. They come in there not as just mercenaries, They come there and they become the servicemen of Russian army. They sign the contract. They are officially so. In this case, you cannot say that, oh yeah, there's American battalion fighting. There are Americans, many of them actually. And for example, French, there is a Free French battalion, things like that. What is important here with North Korea is that they did send the cadre unit of the North Korean army, which is the relations between states. For the first time, North Korea, as pursuant to the treaty between Russia and North Korea, which, remember, Kim just lighting the room after the meeting and signing this thing with Putin, not because only economic issues. There are many North Korean workers now, because as the letter of the treaty stated, to support each other by all means necessary. And this was, okay, we basically actualized this treaty. Here's the official North Korean army. They fought shoulder to shoulder, and they were incorporated in the command control structure, which, by the way, is a whole other story. It's very difficult to do that, But, so you have this North Korean army representatives, however small, fighting with Russians. And that means what? They show treaty, and then you go back to treaty and read this clause, by all means necessary. And what it means, anything happens to North Korea, there will be a Russian army there, officially fighting on, and that's the whole point. That's why it was done. There are many volunteers, there are all kinds of, and again, as already stated, there is a very significant Anglo-Saxon battalion. But you cannot say that, oh yeah, it's a battalion. Those guys are Russian soldiers. They are Russian American, Russian Canadian, Russian British soldiers, but they are Russian soldiers. These are the guys who are not Russian soldiers. They are Korean soldiers. And because of that, now it has been shown, you see, the treaty works. Those clauses are operational, they are in effect, and God forbid anybody does anything to North Korea, you will have the Russian army marching into North Korea and fighting to defending North Korea. And that is why Kim is a very, very happy man. If you saw the opening sequence of my last video with the top on and all that, so you probably will understand that's why he was happy, because he was secured in his now relations. And yeah, Russians openly go out like Dmitriev, the actual Russian envoy to speaking to Trump, and all kinds of other people say, yeah, screw that, sanctions, we are doing business now. And guess what? One of the most popular chains, Wildberries in Russia, they are officially now employing, of course, they are very clean, very disciplined people. They have the political officers there, make no mistake. It's not like they, just go out after the working day and go out into the street bar in Russia or something like that. No. But you can see yourself, for them, it's such an amazing thing to get out of this very enclosed society and go out into the, one of the Russian companies, and then suddenly make money enough to send home. And we know North Korea is very poor, but this is like, holy moly, man. And obviously they provide them with all kinds of accommodations and things like that. So, and this is like dream come true, So this is exactly what is happening. And yes, it was done for geopolitical reasons, to show that they fought for us, we're going to fight for them, so don't even think about it. And again, this clause which reads, by all means necessary. What are all means necessary? Well, Russian army marching into Pyongyang, and then deploying it along there, and it's not going to end well for anybody who gets into this. So considering the fact that North Korean army by in itself is like really massive, but then again, having these guys coming back from Russia, or maybe they just gonna stay and continue. Can you imagine what kind of the tactical experience they provide now for Koreans? It's like, my gosh. So, and don't forget, a lot of Korean weaponry, North Korean weaponry, is essentially the knockoffs, or either Chinese or knockoffs of Soviet weaponry. they get some, more modern things. But after this treaty was signed last year, you may expect many more modern systems getting there, and then, of course, new operational and tactical experience. That is why it is so significant, and that is why it was specifically singled out. I have Serb guys. Oh, why didn't you, mention us? Well, because there is no official Serbian. We know, Serbs are like brothers, fight since 2014. And there are many of them, very many, but they are not Serbian army, and some of them are fighting. They are becoming Russian Serbian soldiers, and they signed the contract with.
Revolutionary salute to our family. LeRon for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
Russian Defense Ministry, and there you go. But this is totally different. This is North Korean army came to help Russians. Russians will come to help North Korea.
And what's interesting is Sputnik has an article, and they go on to say the other areas. So it says, what's next for Russia-North Korea alliance? They go on to say military assistance, of course, but then they say Donbass restoration. Builders from North Korea could be involved in reconstruction things. Development despite sanctions, which means Russia's now going to help North Korea completely.
Oh, it's already helping, yeah.
They said President Putin and Kim Jong-un had a meeting discussing sending a North Korean cosmonaut into space. So certainly space technology, information type technologies, mining and rare earth, and that Russians now will be working with them for mining. So it's great benefit. My understanding is they've got a lot of mining, rare earths and things like that, but of course they don't have the money or the capability. Yeah. So Russia can now come in there, do exploration. It sounds to me, let me ask you this, like a kind of a Belarus thing. You know what I mean? I mean, Russia does have a border with China. With North Korea.
Yeah,
so they can do it like a Belarus kind of, what do you call
that?
No,
it's still going to be union state, but it is definitely a military economic alliance. North Korea is a full-blown ally. With Belarus, it's the union state, obviously, and no, they will still be a kind of independent nation. But even just to give you an example, the North Koreans invested like truckload of money. I don't remember the name. I cannot pronounce it properly. I will slaughter it, obviously, if I try. On the East Coast, they built this huge resort. Okay. Obviously, regular North Koreans are not allowed there. First, they cannot afford it.
Right.
It is built primarily for Russians and some other, but primarily for Russians. Russians still go there just to enjoy the good old totalitarian time from 1940s and 50s. So no, I mean it. It's just like, oh my God, well, believe me, Stalinism has nothing on North Koreans, especially how it was. But first, there is a humanitarian reason, but they have this gigantic resort, which is extremely modern. It is extremely westernized, what would be considered westernized. It's surrounded by, it has its own airport now, and so it's for the tourists. Those rich Russian tourists, come in and, and so when you look at this, it's like, yeah, and they are preparing, obviously, all those, not concessions, maybe even concessions, the joint ventures, and you absolutely, in Sputnik correctly notes, there are many things which will require restoration. You pay them decent wage, but you're obviously going to be paying them per contract, because they are not, there will be, like these guys in Wildberries, there will be Gastarbeiters, that guest workers. So, and for Russia, it's a great deal. And for them, it's a great deal too. Earn money, and that immediately starts the flow of the very good currency, and you can buy so much from Russia, ranging from, guess what? Commercial aircraft, weapons, technology, all things of this nature, and that is the significance of what happened. This is because that is why they did it on purpose, to show that consolidation of the Eurasian, economic and cultural space. And, don't forget, Red Army, Red Air Force fought for North Koreans in 1950s, and it fought really well. U.S. Air Force doesn't like to go and look at the actual numbers of the kill ratios, So, but 64th Air Corps, commanded by legendary triple hero of the Soviet Union, General Ivan Kozheduk, the highest ace of all, every single allied, American, British, Soviet, he commanded it there. So it's a long history. It's very complicated history, but it is a long history of the cooperation there. So, and now we have officially the treaty actualized, not just on economic matters, which everybody says screw sanctions, we don't care, but military, that's what matters. That is just huge.
I would think also it indicates something else. If the Russians are saying, look, if we need to, we'll fight in North Korea. They're fighting here. If their soldiers could potentially be there, it sounds to me like the likelihood is they'll be building an integrated air defense. I mean, if they feel that they need to fight there, that means they need their air defense technologies there. They need their missile technologies. They're shipping missiles. I forgot what the name of it.
You nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good example. Why you are so correct. Why I'm, doing this like this, thingy, there yesterday, Russia delivered to Kyrgyzstan, no less, the latest S-300s. And this is just, it's, to have the actual air defense system, unified air defense system over former Soviet Union, not all of it. Very many of those stars, they don't like Russians. They just, so they are trying to sell themselves to the, to highest bidder. But with North Korea, you absolutely can deliver them the latest systems, including obviously all kinds of they have their own, but still, let's not overplay it, because they still have issues with, for example, really performing the proper ballistic missile on the intercontinental range. They still have the intermediate range missiles, and they have enough artillery and short range missiles, God forbid, of course, to burn, Seoul in like less than several hours, but, and God forbid us ever go there. So, but yeah, in terms of the technology, that's very important. And again, listen, they disclosed a few days back, Kim himself, they just built this frigate, okay? It's 5,000-ton displacement. It has a significant amount of the vertical launch systems. Whatever they put into the vertical launch systems, it doesn't have the, what's the name of it, organic helicopter, which is strange because where there will be the hangar for helicopter, it's also filled with the vertical launch systems. But I mean, and most important thing, which is very important, which people should understand, it's not just whatever the missiles they put into those vertical launch systems. It has the 4 active phased arrays on its mast. I don't think it is some kind of the fake or propaganda thing. I think it's an actual radar with active phased arrays, something similar to Russian Parliament or American Aegis, or Spy-1D rather. Aegis is a combat information control system. So it's like, when the hell did they do that? Because this is expertise of the highest level. You have to have extremely advanced electronics. And so, and is it some kind of the modification of Russian Zaslon, which is put, for example, on the small missile ships of the Project Karakurt, Project 22-800? Look at this like, yeah, I wonder where did they get this thing, if it is actual working station, not just some kind of the, a decoration. I think so, it's a real deal. So whatever it is, there you go, the first large combatant with some missiles and AFAR, and like, yeah, I wonder.
So it looks to me like, at this level, I would imagine you know, they may be manned by Russians. Certainly, they may not give up their technology, but we're looking at Russian missile systems, those coastal anti-ship missiles, maybe even some of the, you know, they may not come out and say it. We know they put Ereshnik in Belarus. They're saying they're doing that, but not saying for sure they're going to do that. But based on a military alliance, it would make sense that you would see really high-level technical, very powerful
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, absolutely correct. And what I'm trying to get now, I'm getting myself into the Google Maps, and I will tell you one thing, and why it is so important to understand what is going on. If you take a look at North Korea, and you, for example, get yourself a range to, let's say, the west coast of, easy. Put any kind of the modern Bastion anti-shipping missiles, and especially if it is the latest version of the P-800 Onyx with the range above 1,000 kilometers, and you basically blockade the whole, not only Japanese Navy, but also the U.S. Navy and the you know, those aircraft carriers which are you know, parked in the all kinds of, you know, and suddenly, wow, it's completely different game. And again, Bastion is also capable of launching, of course, we already know, 3M22 Zircon hypersonic missile. You don't want those things appearing, but they probably will, you know, and they could be manned by Russians, and most likely they will be manned by Russians. So, but yeah, that's what is happening.
If you start, you know, we guessed that the Chinese were at some point asking for maybe Zircon or something like that, or Kinjal, but maybe they gave them to them, maybe they didn't. But either way, if they put them in North Korea, with what do they have, like 1,700 kilometer range or something crazy?
Zircon has 1,500 kilometer range.
Yeah,
and it covers all of it. Covers all Europe, Japan completely. It just you nothing you can do about it. You know. So yep. If you
get tangled with them, your air bases, what have you,
and your bases go up in flames. It just. This is why, for example, it was so important. Krasnoyarsk, one of the latest of the Yasin class submarines, cruise missile submarines, it launched yesterday a number of missiles. It launched the land attack caliber 3M14 from the range of more than 1,100 kilometers. It was inert. It didn't have even warhead. It just like, okay, you can see yourself. There is a target on the ground. It's unbelievable accuracy, incredible. The video. I actually put the video on my blog. They just flew into incredible, just 1,100 kilometers, and yeah, it can literally fly into your, somebody's door, if need be. And the accuracy is amazing. And this type of the weaponry appearing in Korea, it just merely adds the weight of the control of the situation including with China too, So, and who would refuse from basically, even up to the point that unsinkable aircraft carrier, although we have to, and North Korea, that's for Russians, well, they have Vladivostok, obviously, it's all very close. From Vladivostok to North Korea, it's just like hour and a half, if not less than that, by taxi, by cab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's let me tell you again, Google Maps to from Vladivostok to the straight distance is it's probably hour and a half, max 2 hours. That's how close it is.
Wow.
By cab.
Wow. So it's 150 kilometers, something like that.
129 straight. So if you go around, probably 150. So yeah, 2 hours max. And the roads there, once you get out of this border area, there is a Chinese gal who did a wonderful video actually about crossing the border there.
Mhm.
And so you can look it up. And yeah, I just held the cab and bang you in Vladivostok. So it's just
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it now. Wow. That really. Oh, okay, yeah, there's the Russian border. The Russian border is pretty short. What, maybe 100 kilometers or something?
more than enough to move whatever you want, you know. Koreans at some point of time, actually, what they did, there was a pretty tense relations a few years back. What they did, they closed the railroad crossing. That's the only crossing you have there, railroad. And but I'm pretty sure that it is open now and operating in full capacity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing, wow. When I look at Japan, I mean, what you do when you yeah, I didn't realize. Wow, Vladivostok. Wow. Yeah. That's really close.
Yep, everything close. And you know, additional, so to speak, capability to keep Japan, you know, under the proper eye, so to speak, you know. So yeah.
And it really changes. Okay, there's Taiwan. Okay, I'm just looking at everything. It really puts, you know, the other thing, let me ask you about this. I know that China and North Korea have a military alliance.
Well, the kinda. The Chinese were also not very happy with them. But yeah, China will never allow anybody themselves. China wouldn't allow any kind of the movement of the border and force, hostile force, as it was during Korean War. You know, Yalu River, once you cross it, China gets in. You know, period. Today, of course, it's a little bit different, but yeah, you have essentially two superpowers also getting North Korea embraced. Russia certainly embraced it, and there's so much to it. You know, there's so much. Just to give you again, if you take a look, they love to build those. You know, it's bizarre, obviously. You know, almost dystopian towers with the. You look at Pyongyang today. They love to light it up, you know, with all those lights, and you know, it's just like, okay, it's underdeveloped, obviously, in the countryside, but they continue to build those things, and some people get those flats, and obviously the nomenclature, you know, the inner circle, inner party, so to speak, you know, so and that's what we have. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. It really is. So that's.
I also think, you know, oftentimes you hear the Russian leadership talking about cooling the hotheads. You know, the lunatics in Europe are always talking about, well, we want a war with Russia. Well, we got to be prepared for 2029. Yep. I think that's also a message too, and that's a message that says, look, if you think you're going to just go and attack Russia, you're starting World War III. You know what I mean? It's like, if you do that, you're starting World War III. And North Korea has million. They have a significant military that's growing, but it's also a very powerful message to the West saying, okay, North Korea is critical to the Asian Pacific area. Yes, it is. But we have a very important relationship with them, and they understand the North Koreans and the Asians. It's like the linchpin, because the Asians know if Russia ever falls, we're done. If they take Eurasia, that we're finished. They're going to come get us, and it's over. We have no way. Meanwhile, the same way the Russians know, if China, North Korea falls on this side, they're going to come get us from that way. So it's kind of saying North Korea is the linchpin, and North Korea is going to come here and protect their, because Russia. If you're North Korea, you're protecting your interest. You can't let anything happen to Russia. You have to join in the fight. So I think it's a powerful message to the Europeans also, isn't it?
You're absolutely correct. And look at this. What many people, and it's understandable. They're not military people. They do not understand the significance. When Vladimir Putin, about 5 years ago, he came out and says, yeah, I'm not disclosing much. Everybody knows this, but let's stress it. We are helping our Chinese friends to build early warning system of the missile attack. It's like, wow. So what is SPRM? That's how it's called. It's the most advanced beyond and over the horizon radar. And of course, it's integrated also into Russian Kupol system, which is the early system of the satellites. Why does Russia do this? Very simple, because Russia is, let's imagine, even their cool relations, okay? Which started, by the way, when there were pretty cool relations. Oh, here it is.
Look at this. Look who popped in.
Yeah, and the point is, if China is attacked, you want China to be able to be early warned, because if it starts on the Russian soft belly, which China is the longest land border in the world, China and Russia, 7,000 kilometers, I believe. So you want them to be early warned. You want them to be aware. You want them to be reacting properly to all that. And as the result, it's like, and at that time, they started doing this actually before Xi came to power, I believe. But it's accelerated, obviously, once Xi was in power. And there you go. China has the both early warning system, and it has access, and it's plugged into Russian early warning system, including satellite constellation, which is called Kupol. On Tundra orbits, they monitor northern hemisphere 24/7.
Scott Ritter, welcome, 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 my friend. Everybody, don't forget scottritter.com. That's where you go to find all of Scott's good work. Let me read this to you. This is President Putin. We commend the North Korean soldiers' heroism, their excellent training, and dedication displayed while fighting. And this is the part that I felt was very significant symbolically and in a lot of other ways. While fighting shoulder to shoulder with Russian soldiers, defending our motherland as their own. The first thing I thought, Scott, was, I know the level of patriotism in Russia. And the highest honor in Russia is to defend the motherland. That's the highest patriotic honor that you can receive, is to say you defended the motherland. So it seems to me that symbolically speaking, and in another way, number of ways, this is very powerful. Scott Ritter, your thoughts?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is the solidification of North Korea and Russia as strategic allies. And this has very little to do with Kursk. I mean, that's the big show. This has everything to do with North Korea and South Korea, Japan, and the United States. Now that North Korea has acted out, we know what the treaty relationship is between Russia and North Korea. And it's the end. The United States, South Korea, Japan, they will never go to war against North Korea now, because Russia will be linked. And
the reason, I'm sorry for interrupting, the reason I'm smiling, we said exactly the same thing. That, I mean, that's how professionals approach this.
Great minds think alike.
But I also think that, given the fact that Russia and China have a street, that this also brings China in. I don't believe China, had North Korea been aggressed conventionally and in trouble, China may have come in later, sort of what like they did in the first go round. But now Russia will be there from the start, and China will be rapidly there in support. So this changes everything. This is no longer the United States, South Korea, Japan against North Korea. This is the United States, South Korea, Japan against North Korea, Russia, and China. And that's just a game changer. It's the end of American dominance in that area of the world. Japan will have to re-examine its strategic relationships, and so will South Korea, because it's gotten to the point of stupidity. And the United States would do well to also start thinking. And you heard, I think it was today, that the Trump administration is looking at re-engaging with North Korea, because we need to redefine what our relation, what's going on here. Are we going to continue the Biden administration's policies of confrontation? That game's over. That's game's over. By announcing that North Korean troops are fighting side by side with Russians, defending the Russian motherland, that game that the Biden administration was playing is over. We still don't know exactly. Maybe we do. Maybe Andre knows better. You know, there was a period of time where the Ukrainians were saying there's 30,000 North Korean infantry just pouring across, and I'm like, I don't think so. I do believe there was artillery, definitely. I do believe that there was special forces, definitely, and I do believe that there were cadres attached at various headquarter element to learn how, you know, to learn the business of fighting wars like Russians. I do believe that the North Koreans probably got involved in the drone game, because that's sort of the game to be involved in right now. They may have had some armor forces in there doing stuff. And the numbers may have been significant. We could be talking 10,000 North Koreans spread out over all of this, but this isn't the human wave tactics. In fact, now that this is coming, apparently the Ukrainians are coming out saying, yeah, these guys are the best damn infantry we ever gone up against, the best soldiers we've ever, they're highly trained, physically fit, motivated, the whole thing. But as you said, Garland, you know, they kept it. They didn't broadcast it, didn't brag about it. But now that it's over, because this is the other thing I'll point out, I don't think you're going to see North Korean troops going into the Donbass. That's a different kind of fight. That's a more controversial. That's not for the motherland. That's for Novorossiya, which is a whole different construct. Kursk was the motherland. Belgorod is the motherland, and North Korea came to the assistance of their fraternal brothers, the Russians, and this is a game-changing event. Everybody who's focused on Kursk is focused on the wrong thing. I think Andre is nodding his head, so I think we're in agreement. This is the end of American hegemony in the Northern Pacific. It's the Russians are now literally out. And here's the other interesting thing. I'd like to do a line-by-line comparison of the North Korean agreement with the Iranian agreement, and see just what's going on there. Because if there's commonality of language, that means that there's commonality of intent. And you know, we could find a situation where, you know, Iranians suddenly get, you know, called out. You know, we thank our Iranian fraternal brothers for the drone units that they've been fighting side by side, and the rocket units and all this kind of stuff, and which means now that any attack against Iran is an attack against Russia. This is fascinating because Russia has historically avoided entangling alliances. You know, I mean,
well, they've been quiet about it. Usually they're quiet. They're more quiet and subtle about it.
Right, but the Russians, they've heeded George Washington's warning more than America has, to avoid entangling alliances. You know, the Russians enjoy the flexibility, the freedom of action, and the sovereignty of being their own boss, not being, you know, able to be drawn into conflicts outside of their control. With North Korea now, Russia has said, your fight is our fight. Mikasa Sukasa. And this is a game changer, but I think it's for the better, because the United States, Japan, and South Korea were starting to basically get into the we're going to gang up on North Korea and bully them mode. And the North Koreans are like, well, we don't bully, but that's okay. I mean, you've heard that old, I forget who it was, who was the running back for Cleveland Browns, famous Jim Brown. Jim Brown, when he retired, he was going around, he was in a bar, and some guy came up to him and was like, you're Jim Brown, you don't look so bad, I'm going to kick your ass. And Jim Brown apparently put down his beer and said, that's just one ass cook, Kepkin, I'm going to have to take. Let's go. And, you know, he, of course, didn't get his ass kicked. And that's, to me, the North Koreans are Jim Brown. They're just like, you guys, you want to fight me? Okay. But now the Russians are looking at that saying, we don't want that. We don't want a fight in this area of the world. So what we're going to do is make sure there isn't a fight by saying, you fight him, Big Brother's coming in with everything that entails. And that takes the fight right out of it. The schoolyard bullies are no longer going to be picking on, you know, isolated North Korea, because, you know, they've got the Big Brother from college hanging out now in the playground. And this is big. This is really big.
Scott, I mean, Andre.
Well, I mean, What else? I mean, there's nothing to add.
Well, let me throw something at you, Andre.
We basically
Let me throw something at you that made me. I thought about a few minutes ago. About a month or so ago, the Russians. You heard something coming out of Moscow, and it was this: we're concerned that this. What they say, very much concerned that this economic war could turn into a hot war, right? Yeah. Very much concerned. And I think if you think about, everybody thinks about the Russians' Eastern Front, but they got a soft spot in the Pacific because they don't have the amount of people, they don't have the you know what I mean? They can defend it, but everything's focused on the Eastern Front. This shores up their Pacific border.
It's not only that. If you look attentively at the dynamics of, for example, rearming and rebuilding Russian Pacific Fleet, it is rather impressive, actually. They have more. Pacific Fleet has more Yasin-class cruise missile submarines. They have all new nuclear deterrent there. There are a bunch, and they have now new component, which is diesel component. Komsomolsk-on-Amur builds those 6 brand new, 3 already afloat. But it's called the Project 636. Very effective and caliber carrying diesel subs, and all kinds of other things are happening there, including, for example, moving the updated IL-38N Novella anti-submarine warfare. It's state-of-the-art digital, all that, all bells and whistles, older frames like almost P3 Orion, but it's IL-18s there, so IL-38s as they call. So it's all there now, and everything is being built, including the aviation. And you take a look at it, Krasnoyarsk, the submarine yesterday launched that. It's basically a hint to Japan. We are watching you, and if not, your naval bases are gone in whatever it takes to fly Zircons and Calibers 3M54s into those bases, and you're not going to catch us. Now you have North Korea, and I looked it up from about the middle to Okinawa. It's 1,300 kilometers. It's Zircon range. Place it in the middle of nowhere in mountains, the Bastion, launch, and that's it. And so, there's a lot of going on. And yes, I can reiterate what we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes. It's geostrategic. It is huge. It is shift. Again, you cannot say, I want to repeat, there is a very large force, battalion size plus. There are many Americans, British, Anglo-Saxon battalion, they call it. But they are not there as representatives of the United States. They are representatives now, and they are Russian soldiers, essentially. Russian-American, again, as we already stated, we already discussed it. So, but they are not in official capacity. Even the platoon of the, let's say, North Koreans, who would come, obviously it's larger than that, probably a regiment, maybe even brigade-sized force, but that's about it. But you come there as the unit officially representing the state of North Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you have orders, you are part of this, and in international, from the point of view of international law and international documents which you sign, this is gigantic. That is why I'm so pissed on my Serbian friends who said, oh, you didn't mention Serbs. No, I mentioned Serbs. They are Russian brothers, they fight there together, shoulder to shoulder, but they are not there as the capacity of the state of Serbia. They are there, some volunteers, but now volunteer kind of businesses is over. They are basically signed contract with Russian Defense Ministry. They become Russian soldiers, Russian Serbian, Russian American, like this kid. Good Lord, the deputy CIA director, the kid was killed at just 21 years. Good Lord, what a waste. Poor kid. So it's just like, you become Russian soldier. The guy was a paratrooper for crying with the WW3. It's like, holy moly, 21 years old, for WW3 to accept, for the paratroopers to accept somebody like their own. That means you're pretty, headless. Let's put it this way. The kid died, obviously, heroically, So it's just, that's what it is. And
Scott, you know, here's the other part. Andre and I have been talking about it. If the Russians potentially going to be fighting there, then you can be sure there's going to be Russian missile systems there. You can be sure they're building an integrated air defense with electronic warfare. That it's going to be prickly, as the Americans like to say, turned into a porcupine. But not just that, they're defending their own. But here's the thing about it. What we hear in the news is Donald Trump now wants to go. The Americans want to go meet with the North Korean leaders to try to work a deal. It's a whole different conversation now when you're talking about getting a deal with the North Korea that is technologically, you know, they had a lot of stuff. They had lots of stuff that they could heave over in the Seoul. They had a few missiles. They had some things. They had some, considering their abilities. You got to give them credit for what they did. Now they are the real deal. And this is a way different conversation to get a deal with North Korea. And in fact, I would argue this. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't something Witkoff was talking about, because you got to talk to the Russians, I think, now, if you want to deal with the North Koreans. What do you think of all that, Scott?
I think that's part of the Witkoff conversations, that there's two aspects of the conversations that people aren't emphasizing enough. I de-emphasize the Ukrainian-Russian aspect of it. Witkoff is just there to receive the Russian position and articulate it back to Trump. That's it. There's no negotiation taking place at all. The Russians are simply saying, this is our position, and we'll tell you again why we feel this way and why it's important. And I guess Witkoff does play a role there because he is very pragmatic and realistic. It's fascinating to hear an American government official talking about the reality of the situation, as you know, not what we want it to be, but what it is. It's very rare to hear that, especially when the positions are in opposition to the official policy of the United States. Normally, we speak of reality-based decisions when everything's going our way, but when everything's going against us, we go into fiction mode. That's not happening with Trump. So Witkoff gets credit for that. But the two big things, I believe, are the economic aspect of it. And here, I don't view it as so much about business, although it is business related. This is the security guarantee aspect of things. You know, Russia has said, and you heard it from Lavrov today, he said, you know, we're going to need security guarantees as well. It's not just Ukraine that, you know, you're asking us to stop kicking their ass. You're asking us to give up the dominant position that we have attained, not only against Ukraine, but against Europe and against you, America, you know, because we're kicking everybody's ass. And you're asking us to stop kicking your ass. So we need guarantees that if we're going to stop this, you're not going to turn around and play stupid games again. And so the business side, that kind of integration, I think, is the security guarantee. So it's more than just a business deal. I think there's a security aspect to it, a confidence building, et cetera, too, because it's a different kind of business. This will be very tailored, specific engagements of a strategic nature. Russia's not allowing the United States to come back in and weave itself into the Russian business fabric. The Russian government has already said, when you guys left, you left on your own volition. We didn't kick you out. You left, which means you were actively supporting the other side. You took sides. And now we have Russian businesses that have filled the void, and they're succeeding. And we have Russian business people who are doing well, and we're not going to betray them. We're not going to say, hey, thanks for holding the line for a couple of years, but now we're bringing back in the West. No, there are markets which will be denied to the West because they've been filled by Russians. So the business engagement we're speaking of is not going to be, you know, the way it was. This is going to be strategic level engagement, similar to what we used to do in the oil business. You know, the idea of getting Chevron and BP and everybody into the Russian oil business was to link, you know, the Russian economy with the West. I don't know if Russia's ever going to allow that kind of investment again, but there will be some, I think, strategic minerals, these you know, there's potential there, and there's potential in the energy sector as well. But there's that. But another thing, and I see this playing, it's not talked about, but you see indirectly. Look at Iran. The Iranian negotiations that Witkoff is involved are happening on multiple fronts. Witkoff isn't just meeting in Qatar to talk with the Iranian foreign minister. Witkoff is going to Moscow and talking Iran with Putin, Ushakov, and company. What can Russia do? What can Russia do? Russia's close relationship with Iran makes it a broker of peace. Russia gives opportunities for alternative courses of action that otherwise. And the reason why I bring up Iran is that's the same thing Russia can do with North Korea. The United States, Donald Trump isn't going to go in and play the card that he before. I'm going to turn the North Korean coastline into the new Las Vegas Riviera, baby. You're going to have North Korean girls wearing bikinis before you know it. You know, we're going to turn your sacred mountain into a new Aspen ski slope. This is going to be wonderful. And the North Koreans were like, oh, cool. But then you lost them because Pompeo and Bolton stabbed Trump in the back, and that was it. Right now, you know, another thing that we're talking, you know, we have this military relationship. The North Korean economy is in a revival right now. And we're talking about the kind of revival that has high paying jobs, the skilled labor force that is going into Russia, by the way, to get money and bring them. You're seeing a radical transformation for the better of North Korea. I said before, in 5 years, when they show that overhead photograph, you know, the one that they always show, the big dark spot where North Korea is, that ain't going to be dark anymore. It's going to be lit up, maybe even more lit up than South Korea. And so, what is Trump going to do? It has to be a different kind of engagement. And so, this will be a stability engagement. It's no longer about America coming in and dominating, America calling the shots. We don't have any cards. This is about how do we make sure that we don't get a conflict here? What do we have to do to engage North Koreans to begin this conflict? And if you have better engagement with the Russians, that can translate into more productive engagement with the North Koreans. Just like if you have good engagement with the Russians, that can translate into better engagement with the Iranians. I think that's the level of engagement that we're talking about here. And I think Witkoff, you know, who knows how this will play out, but he is emerging as one of the more interesting.
He is a diplomat now. He is full-blown diplomat.
Diplomat. He is a personality. He is he's a historic figure right now. He is playing a role that he wasn't. I mean, we call him a diplomat, but you know, there's no diplomatic training here. He doesn't, you know. But this guy is hitting home runs. I know that he's fouled out in the Middle East and in Gaza, but that's not his fault. You it doesn't matter how much lipstick you have, a pig will be a pig, and Gaza is a pig. I'm not picking on the Palestinians. I'm just saying that situation, the Israelis, the Israeli lobby, everything conspires against anything meaningful being done there. So Witkoff, you know, I don't even think he can magically cure this, but what he's doing with Iran, what he's doing with Russia, and potentially what he could be doing with North Korea. I wouldn't be surprised if Witkoff wasn't the man leading that delegation as well. So he's going to go down in history as one of these larger than life figures. He's definitely, you know, making a mark for himself.
Well, one of the things I'll throw in there is, you know, for so many decades with the neocons, whenever they talk about foreign policy, it's some kind of crazy narrative. You know, the Russians are fighting with shovels. Somebody's running out of missiles. It's something crazy. And you listen to Witkoff, whether you like what he's saying or not. He goes and talks to somebody and he says, this is the way it is. Now, he may get some heat and he may have to back off. But when he comes out of the meeting, he says, this is what I was told. You can't go any. You know, it's funny. I was listening to Lavrov the other day, and Lavrov was doing that interview, and they said they asked him. They said, well, basically, you said that you didn't want the sanctions to go away. I'm paraphrasing. What do you have to say about that? And Lavrov says, you quoted me accurately. And every time they bring it up, he'd say, "You quoted me." He said, like, that's the one time you finally quoted, I'm paraphrasing, one time you finally quoted me accurately. He made it clear, I'm not interested in the sanctions. He made it clear that as he stands, he doesn't want them taken. Anyway, your thoughts on all of this stuff, Andre?
Listen, before I need to go so far. Yeah, before I need to go in a couple of minutes.
Okay, we got 4 or 5 minutes. We're out.
Yeah, it's actually called Wonsan Kalma Coastal Tourism Area, aka the Wonsan Beach. You can see yourself. It's a massive construction there, which was largely already completed. So, and that's international. Well, it's for Russians primarily, and they have it's in an airport. But yeah, anybody can go there if you get visa, of course. So, but in terms of Lavrov and sanctions, I mean, sanctions. Before I go, yeah, I don't want to be charged by Russian government, that I am all for it, or but yeah, I mean, they played a very positive role for Russia. So, and there's no denial of that. I mean, it's just, but I warned about it for so many years that we don't do that, but they did it. So, what can I say? Lavrov, yeah, it's difficult to communicate with some bimbos from establishment media, honestly. It just, but Lavrov handled it well. That's why he's Lavrov. Okay, guys, I really need to go. Okay.
We all do. Scott, don't forget, everybody, Reminiscence of the Future is Andre's blog, and Smoothie X12 is his YouTube. Go to Scott.
$1,000 an ounce. I'm so glad I bought World. Big banks and billionaires are buying gold in record amounts. As long as paper money keeps falling, they'll keep buying. JudgeNap.com, and tell them your friend the judge sent.
The other about the untrustworthiness of NATO. Before we get to either of them, were you surprised that no high-ranking Israeli official attended the Pope's funeral?
No, I wouldn't be surprised. They've been a classless outfit from the beginning. So why change now? The smart thing, the diplomatic thing, would be to go and make that gesture, even if you didn't mean it. I mean, that's they said the art of diplomacy is learning how to lie, or tell people uncomfortable truths, and they say thank you at the end. So there's this old saying, Israel never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, but from your perspective and Ray's and mine, the Pope didn't do nearly enough. He really did very little to reduce the slaughter in Gaza. From the Israeli perspective, calling a priest at a church in Gaza on the phone a couple times a week, that's diplomatically offensive. Come on, the priest works for him.
Yeah, I mean, what the Pope should have done was send his envoys, emissaries into Gaza, into the church in Gaza. Didn't do that. He should have sent a relief convoy under a Vatican flag, if you will, and forced the Israelis to turn it away. He could have put a lot of pressure on Israel, but he didn't. He just talked. So, but again, he thinks that he was being, conciliatory in some aspects to not provoke Israel. Well, a lot of good it did. It didn't change a thing.
Yeah. How serious are the political divisions in Israel as we speak? The opposition leader in the Knesset, Yair Lapid, says he wouldn't be surprised if soon Jews will be killing Jews. Haaretz, a newspaper that you and I read every day, the English version of it, says Netanyahu is trying to establish a dictatorship. Is this stuff just political claptrap, or is it evidence of serious divisions?
Well, I have limited experience with the Israelis. I visited Israel twice. I was involved in one training program for a group of Israeli police, senior crisis management seminar 20 years ago. So I rely more on Alistair and his wife Aisling for their analysis and assessment, because they actually they dive deep into the Hebrew press, and it's serious. The divisions are real. They are deep. They are irreconcilable because they represent really two fundamentally different worldviews. And it would appear that those aligned with Bibi Netanyahu are more in the ascendancy. But you still got the old, let's call it the European crew, the folks who were more liberal, less religious. They're not inclined to sit there and believe that everything written in the Old Testament is the absolute immutable word of God, and therefore must be adhered to. But this attack on the head of Shin Bet, that appears to be a watershed moment in the history of Israel.
Yeah, it does appear to be a watershed moment. And now, last night, Netanyahu filed papers under oath accusing the head of Shin Bet of lying, and it doesn't appear that his allegations of lying are gaining traction, but the allegations against him are. His friend was in Wall Street. Chris, you have those clips? This is Ben Gvir in New York City yesterday, and he's being harangued and harassed by American Jews who were shouting at him in Hebrew in New York, to the point where they had to find the police to give him an escort. But he's Hebrew, so we can't translate it. They're not praising him, that's for sure.
But he's a convicted terrorist.
Yes.
We allowed a convicted terrorist into the United States.
Wow. Well, we provide aid to the president of Syria, even though that's a felony, providing aid to a terrorist organization. The government does whatever it wants when you are its contemporary, or in this case, perpetual ally.
Yeah. Well, remember, it was an Israeli court that convicted Ben Gvir of terrorism charges. Not an American, not a Nazi, not a German, not a British. It was an Israeli court. So it was Jews who judged him as a terrorist.
Did he go to jail?
I don't know if it was a suspended sentence or what, but he was convicted. And twice.
Wow.
Twice convicted.
How serious is the push to remove Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and who or what is behind it?
I got the best insight into that from the interview that Tucker did with Dan Caldwell. One of he was a longtime associate of Hegseth and had been with him at the Concerned Veterans of America, and he intimated that he thinks that this is an effort to get rid of Hegseth or rein him in, and so that he will not be an opponent of military strikes against Iran. Caldwell made a point that there were still several holdovers from the Biden administration sitting on defense policy boards and such that hadn't been rooted out, that they were the most likely sources of leaks. He insisted he had nothing to do with leaking. He hadn't talked to any reporter. I take him at his word. Somebody at the White House put pressure on Hegseth to do this. And I don't know if it's Susie Wiles. It most likely it'd have to be Wiles. Because there's really nobody else at the White House.
Why would they want somebody like Caldwell, who's a longtime colleague, obviously trusted? Was the White House surprised at those signal transcripts when it was Hegseth? And I was surprised, since I know Pete, when it was Hegseth who was advising against an attack on Iran.
Well, right, but Caldwell's views were known, and others, and there apparently been some friction within the Pentagon between the pro-war and the anti-war camp. And I'd put Caldwell, as is usually the case, those who've actually been to war are the ones least likely and willing to go out and start it again. They know the cost, they know the pain. So definitely there are efforts to take Hegseth out, but it looks like he's weathering the storm so far.
Okay. Is Trump really adverse to war? I mean, in the same week that he sent out that Truth Social tweet, or whatever you call it, posting, saying Vladimir, stop, and then on Air Force One said how horrible it was that the Russians are killing civilians. The very same week, his people were killing civilians in Yemen.
Well, it's not only that. Trump likes to pretend that all the responsibility for the war in Ukraine is just Joe Biden and Barack Obama, man. I had nothing to do with this. Wrong. Utter nonsense. Trump's first term, the three-part series that you referenced that I produced over the weekend, the road to war in Ukraine at sonar21.com, I go in detail how the NATO was being built up starting in 1992, and then how it accelerated through the decade of the 2000s, and then into the decade of 2011 to 2021. When Donald Trump was president in 2017, the NATO exercise shifted from being defensive to being offensive, because in 2017, for the first time in Operation Seabreeze, it's listed as doing anti-submarine warfare, amphibious warfare. Remember, Trump proudly says, I sent javelins. I didn't send blankets like Obama. I sent javelins. Okay, so he's sending weapons to Ukraine that Ukraine was going to use in attacking Russians. Then in 2020, well, who's still president? Donald Trump. For the first time, B-52 bombers fly along the Crimean coast as part of a military exercise. What would we think if Russian bombers were flying along the Mexican border as part of an exercise? We would lose our minds. So Donald Trump likes to pretend that he's some sort of neutral mediator in this, and I got nothing to do with this war. Nonsense. He's a facilitator of it. He's an enabler of it. He has got blood on his hands, just like Barack Obama and Joe Biden. He's one and the same, and he needs to cut the crap. He needs to stop this act like, oh, well, Russia and Ukraine, they're just fighting, and I don't know why. No, what I lay out under that NATO article, when you go back and look, in 2011, the Ukrainian army stood at a man strength of 200,000 with 120,000 reserves. 10 years later, those reserves were at 900,000. The army was at 250,000. So they'd gone from basically a 300,000 man force to a 1.1 million force under the auspices of Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and that was just Barack Obama and Donald Trump. That's when that army in Ukraine grew. Didn't grow under Joe Biden. It grew under Donald Trump and Barack Obama. And he's got to own that. And
whoever is interested in this fascinating series that Larry has published, that's not very long and it's easily readable, The Road to War in Ukraine, the history of NATO and U.S. military exercises with Ukraine, a three-part series. You can go to Larry's website, Sonar, S-O-N-A-R 21, Sonar, and then the number 21.com, and you will find it right there. It captivated me, Larry. I linked onto it late at night, and I couldn't stop reading it, and I'm happy that you did it, and I'm happy that you're here to explain it.
But
Marco Rubio,
Judge, let me just comment one other fact that I was surprised by when I went back and I said, hey, they've done all these exercises. Where have they done? Which countries have hosted these NATO exercises? So there are 28 countries in NATO. You'd think those 28 countries it would be them that would host the exercises. Of the top 7, the 2 were Ukraine and Georgia, who were not NATO members. They were hosting a majority of the NATO exercises. What the hell?
Well, when General Kellogg made his absurd offer, which to end the war, which would have resulted in a partitioning of Ukraine, much like Germany after World War II, and implicated NATO. A, how unbelievable is that? B, how untrustworthy is NATO to keep the peace? And C, why under heaven would Trump have authorized Kellogg to have made that offer publicly?
Yeah, he shouldn't have. Look, what is clear is that Russia wants to, one of Russia's goals or stated goals is that NATO is going to end all military exercises on its borders. That will no longer exercise with Ukraine. That's a given. But the military exercises in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, that's going to end too. That Russia is no longer going to be living under this threat, because that is exactly what it is. These are military exercises designed to prepare for an attack on Russia. They like to pretend, oh, these are defensive. We're preparing in case Russia invades. Nonsense. There's just the simple fact that when you run an anti-submarine warfare mission, an amphibious warfare mission, and as you saw in one of the articles, I posted a video from 2017. Who was president then? Donald Trump.
Right.
U.S. Marines landing in amphibious craft on the beaches of Ukraine down in the Black Sea. Now, when we did that on Tarawa, when we did that on Iwo Jima, when we did that on Guadalcanal, we didn't call those defensive operations. Those were offensive operations. So we've got to recognize that we've created this massive war machine, and it's been targeted at Russia for 32 years.
Here's one of the people that spoke out in favor of that targeting. He just now happens to be the Secretary of State of the United States. Chris, cut number 2.
Quote, Vladimir Putin is the real aggressor in this war, and he is attempting an unjustified takeover of a sovereign democratic country. The United States cannot recognize Putin's claims, or we risk establishing a dangerous precedent for other authoritarian regimes like the Chinese Communist Party to imitate. What message does it send to China and other adversaries if the United States allows Russia to keep the land it's illegally claimed?
Well, first of all, I would say that right now there's a lot of press reports about this, that, or these concessions or that concessions. A lot of things have been discussed. And the reason why those things are being discussed is very simple. Not because we're going to force anyone to do anything or pressure anyone to do anything like this, but because we need to understand what are the options to bringing about an end to the war. We need to be grown-ups and realistic here. In any negotiated end to a war, both sides get something and both sides have to give something up. That's a reality. Without speaking specifically about that or another, you wrote that, you talk about that was back in September of 2022. Since September of 2022, this war has continued. Thousands of more people have died. Generational destruction that Ukraine's going to spend 2 generations rebuilding from. This is a war that needs to end now. And so in order for this war to end, there are things Russia wants that it will not get, and there are things Ukraine wants that it will not get.
Can't explain his change of mind 180 degrees, except that he now works for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, and he's still wrong. You know, he says, well, both sides are going to have to give something up. No, Russia is not going to give an inch. Just today, our friend Sergei Lavrov was giving an interview to the Brazilian newspaper, O Globo. And let me just quickly tick off. Here's what he said. Ukraine must lift its legislative ban on negotiations with Russia. Ukraine cannot become a NATO member and must maintain a neutral and non-aligned status. Russia seeks to overcome the consequences of the neo-Nazi regime in Kiev, including efforts to legislate and physically destroy everything Russian, which includes language, media, culture, traditions, and canonical orthodoxy. Russia demands international recognition of its ownership of Crimea, Sevastopol, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia. Lavrov stated all of Kiev's obligations must be legally secured, have enforcement mechanisms, and be permanent. And then he went on to say they've got to demilitarize, denazify, lift the sanctions, and address the lawsuits and arrest warrants and return Russian assets. Do you hear any concessions in there, Judge? I didn't.
Wow. No, there's no concessions in there.
That's
one wonders though. I don't know what Trump and Zelensky talked about. Nobody was listening to them, which my knowledge of Donald Trump is that's dangerous. A, he doesn't remember everything, and B, he'll come away with his own version of things.
Well,
however, there's no concession coming from the Russians, notwithstanding the efforts of Margaret Brennan to try and get some from Sergei Lavrov. Here's one of my favorite clips from her interview with him yesterday. Chris, cut number 7.
Will Russia continue targeting Kyiv despite President Trump saying, Vladimir, stop?
You're not listening to me. We will continue to target the sites used by the military of Ukraine, by some mercenaries from foreign countries, and by instructors whom the Europeans officially sent to help target Russian civilian sites.
You see him catch himself about mercenaries. He knows that some of those mercenaries and some of those instructors are Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, again, like I said, I called it a master class in how to do diplomacy. Can you imagine? We don't have. I can't name a single American politician or diplomat that could go on Russian television in Russian language and deal with questions from a hostile interrogator with the aplomb and skill demonstrated by Lavrov. Not one.
No, agreed entirely, Larry. Here's another one. Cut number 6.
Will Russia?
If you want a ceasefire, just to continue supply arms to Ukraine,
right.
So what is your purpose? You know what Kaja Kallas and what's his name, Mark Rutte said about the
NATO
ceasefire,
Secretary General and the European Union.
They bluntly stated that they can support only the deal which at the end of the day will make Ukraine stronger, would make Ukraine a victor. So if this is the purpose of the ceasefire, I don't think this is what President Trump wants. This is what Europeans, together with Zelensky, want to make out of President Trump's initiative.
He's 100% correct.
Yeah.
The Europeans do not want peace. Von der Leyen wants to become the commander-in-chief of a military.
Now, you know, I can make the case that the Russians, particularly during the presidency of Obama and Trump, were extraordinarily naive, that they were entirely too trusting, that they believed too much that they could actually diffuse a future conflict through negotiation. Because all I can tell you is looking back on the 32-year record that I documented in my recent pieces, that the United States is committed unalterably to destroying Russia. There is no, while people like Donald Trump, yes, appear to want to have a deal, want to work it out, you got to deal with the statements by people like even Senator John Kennedy, who was just on the air in the last 24 hours, saying either Putin gives into a ceasefire or we're going to turn him into dust. Really? That's your play. You know, that's your play against a country that has hypersonic missiles, at least 3 categories that are, some of them are intercontinental. We don't have a single one. And yet they've defeated every military system we put on the battlefield in Ukraine, and that we planned. Our generals were planning the operations. We were providing the intelligence for the operations, and they defeated us. And instead of that, we continue to be bellicose and make these threats against Russia. I think they finally, you know, are awake in Moscow and realize there's no negotiating. We'll talk to these people. We will still leave negotiation open as a channel, as Lavrov made clear to Margaret Brennan during that 45-minute interview. But Russia's not, they're not going to pull their pants down and let us have their way with them. They're not going to do that.
Senator Kennedy, who's actually a lot smarter than his country bumpkin image, actually said the United States would turn Vladimir Putin and his country into fish food.
Yeah, fish food.
This may be something that plays well in Louisiana, but it's absolutely absurd. I wonder what you think of this. Marco Rubio saying we're going to give them another week, just a week. Cut number one.
We think we brought the sides closer than they've been in a very long time, but we're not there yet, and it needs to start happening. We need to start. I think this is going to be a very critical week. This week is going to be a really important week in which we have to make a determination about whether this is an endeavor that we want to continue to be involved in, or if it's time to sort of focus on some other issues that are equally, if not more important in some cases. But we want to see it happen. There are reasons to be optimistic, but there are reasons to be realistic, of course, as well. We're close, but we're not close enough.
Yeah, the good news out of that is I hope he's right, because he's two options, not three. Option one, okay, we go on, we continue to keep the negotiations open, we'll come to a negotiated settlement. Option two, we're walking away, we're getting out. He did not lay out option three, which could have been, we're going to re-up our armament, we're going to give them everything they need to fight, we're going to give them intelligence, we're going to up this war against Russia. Didn't say that. So I took that as good news.
Larry Johnson, thank you, my dear friend. Very, very helpful, very insightful. Again,
This is WW7. We have a massive blackout affecting multiple countries in the EU. This originated, it looks like, in Spain. It's affecting Spain, Portugal, at least France, and maybe a couple other places. But right now, Portugal's grid operator is saying that the blackout that is plaguing Portugal right now, and Spain and France, is caused by Spain's electricity grid malfunctioning. They're blaming this on a rare atmospheric phenomenon. They're trying to say that temperature fluctuations in the middle of Spain led to disconnections of certain utilities. They haven't really explained how that is. Other people are saying that it sounds fishy. There's no way that if the power goes down in Spain that it should black out other countries. But I'm not sure how all of Europe has their power grid set up and intertwined throughout the countries. But it looks to be large scale at this point. I got a video clip here showing the people running around pretty much in the dark, trying to figure out, what's going on. Everybody's got their lights out. It seems like some backup lighting in the downtown area, emergency lighting is on, but all the rest of the lights are out. And you can see everybody standing around in the dark, so to speak. And they're not getting any answers as to when it's going to be back. The officials saying they're trying to get it back on, but as for when, nobody knows. You can see the train services shut down. People just having to walk from wherever they're at. So this is a pretty big blackout, man. They say no payments are possible without cash. So no food and no transportation. Very limited internet and no clue whether it'll actually be resolved. This is what people are facing. So just remember that. Can't get no food because you can't get no cash out. And when the power's down and all the electronics are down, that's where cash is king and always has been. But those countries that are moving away from it are going to find out the hard way. They also say parts of France are affected and trying to come back online. Barcelona and Valencia were hit by the outage. So they're saying that this is massive. Massive, really massive power outage is what they're saying on Bloomberg. So multiple countries in the dark. Again, they're saying that power fluctuations, temperature fluctuations cause this. If I find out any different, I'll make sure to kick it out on X. Make sure to follow me over there. And also join us for the live stream.
Let's talk about the blackouts. Did renewable energy cause the massive blackouts across the Iberian Peninsula today? Experts warn that it could be, but green idiots went ahead with renewable projects anyway. And today we saw utter pandemonium. I mean, just look at the streets here. These are people getting off subways. They had to get out of these trains that just stopped. They just stopped. All running on electric. They're stuck inside, had to pry the doors open to get out of here. These buses are pulling up, trying to get these people out and people in. People just lined up on the streets trying to get home. That was in Portugal. People just crowding through the buses trying to get through. It's been an absolute nightmare. I mean, people waiting huge, massive lines just trying to get money out of ATM machines. So we have power outages in Portugal, Spain, parts of France. And it will likely be one of the largest power failures in European history. Is it any coincidence, by the way, that this major outage just came days after Spain announced this? Watch. Spain hits first weekday of 100% renewable power on the national grid. I don't believe in coincidences, but they're celebrating this. Spain's grid ran entirely on renewable energy for the first time on April 16th, with wind, solar, hydro meeting all the peninsular electricity demand during a weekday. 5 days later, solar set a new record. Yeah. They say that on April 16th, the entire country's grid ran entirely on renewable energy for the first time. And 12 days later, the entire region has a full-blown outage. The network responsible for this is REN, and they're saying the outage was due to rare atmospheric anomalies. And they are specifically saying that it happened in Spain, not Portugal, but specifically in Spain. We've just heard from REN, Portugal's grid operator. It claims the outage that affected Portugal was caused by a fault in the Spanish electricity grid related to a rare atmospheric phenomenon. Extreme temperature variations in Spain. There were anomalous oscillations in very high voltage lines. Okay. They say it came from high temperature variations. Go ahead.
I mean, don't like atmospheric phenomenon. They usually have names. They'll say like a solar flare or like some kind of like just a. It was. Right. We know it was an atmospheric phenomenon, but we have no idea what it was. It was just rare.
It was rare.
What was it? I mean, a rare what?
I think. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some speculation. Oh, yeah, it was solar flare. Oh, really? Was it? Does it have anything to do with the weather manipulation programs that we have available at the South Pole Station that took out the entire electric grid? if you saw my interview with Eric Hecker, who worked at the South Pole Station and is a whistleblower and blew the lid off of the massive weather manipulation machinery that's down there, the earthquake generating machines. As he described, it's like HARP on steroids. Have anything to do with that? But, you know, the way that these things are designed, as Eric has pointed out, these are designed to have plausible deniability. So they can wash their hands of it. Does it have anything to do with the South Pole Station, specifically targeting Europe? Who knows? So they say it comes from high temperature variations and anomalous oscillations in high voltage lines. Well, if we look at the report on renewables, it acknowledged variation in wind and solar power. Take a look at this. At 11:15 a.m., that day on April 16th, wind and PV combined to generate 100% of total demand. That was a first in Spain's energy history, unlike previous milestones. This occurred on a weekday. On April 21st at 1:35 p.m., solar reached a new record for instantaneous power generating. 20,000 milliwatts. That's 0.7% higher than the previous record set on July 12th back in 2024. At that moment, PV accounted for 61% of the national mix and 78% of demand. So it says that solar reached new records just last week. Could these variations be responsible for the grid's response? Solar fluctuations could, in theory, set the stage for a massive crash, especially if solar production spiked or dropped very quickly. And as a person, me, who had over 40 solar panels, you can watch literally on the app as a cloud moves in front of your solar panels and boom, huge drop in power. And then a huge spike in power. And so much so that it would actually cause outages. Yes, that's true. Multiple outages. It would create highly unstable environments where even modest disruptions, technical, cyber, weather, could cause an outage. Journalist Michael Schellenberger reports that in 2024, cybersecurity researchers warned that vulnerabilities in widely used solar inverter models could allow mass remote shutdowns, but those warnings were not heeded. So he shows that this came within 0.2 hertz of shutting down all of Europe, the entire European power grid. He said it was milliseconds away from shutting it down. So this shows just how fragile these EV renewable energy systems are. We should not expect a straight answer from the government. So without an expert opinion, this is just conjecture, but this could be a failure of renewable energy being put on the grid of an entire region. Originally, there were reports that this was a Russian hack. Of course, they always blame the Russians right away, right? It's Russia, with absolutely no proof whatsoever other than warnings last week from Dutch intelligence. Russia ramping up hybrid attacks against Europe, Dutch intelligence says. Okay. EU Council President Antonio Costa says that they have no evidence of a cyber attack, though. Okay. I mean, they desperately want to go to war with Russia. So you can bet your bottom dollar that the head of the EU's council president Costa and Brussels would be all over this if it smelled like Russia, as we're nearing a peace agreement, right? They would absolutely love to say that Russia was behind this. In Madrid alone, by the way, the fire department had to do 170 elevator rescues, meaning people were trapped in elevators and couldn't get out. That's terrifying. People were stranded on trains in the middle of nowhere. They're now being told that no train travel can happen for the next few days. Police had to come out and bring them water, not to mention the subways. Schools are canceled for tomorrow. Store shelves are empty. Friends of ours in our WhatsApp group, because we lived in Portugal, said the stores are like COVID era, empty shelves everywhere, and everyone is spooked about it. Internet mobile service is down. Electric car chargers are down. Fuel pumps are out. The Madrid Open was canceled. There was a prime minister debate in Portugal that has been canceled. Spain shut down its nuclear power plants, but they said they are stabilized because they're running on generators. Portugal is saying that it will take longer to get fully up and running because their infrastructure is different than Spain's. It's a mess. And then, of course, at the heart of all of this, many of these, well, and certainly in Portugal, the energy infrastructure is owned by China. So EDP in Portugal, owned by China. A lot of the infrastructure owned by China, and a good portion of it owned by BlackRock as well. But yeah, so did we get into this trouble because of renewable energy? The massive fluctuations between solar and wind, and you shut down your nuclear power plants, you move away from fossil fuels, and you turn towards renewables, and you have this disaster. But it's an atmospheric anomaly. Okay. That's what it is. And because they absolutely do not want to admit that it's because of renewable energy. Just like they didn't really want to admit it in Texas. Remember when we had that deep freeze blackout in Texas because of the renewable energy infrastructure? They didn't want to admit that either. So they're very quick to come out with an answer on this. But we'll be watching it.
We are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So I was actually not planning on making a video today. I'm actually making a video for Seconds of Horror because I like the mystery, the creepy, the paranormal, things like that. But when I saw this news story, I said to myself, I have to talk about this. Now, what is it that I wanted to talk about so badly? Well, if you're not aware, parts of Europe, mainly Portugal, Spain, and parts of France, they had received a major power outage. Tens of millions of people were without power. I actually made a video a couple months ago where I said it seems like every 2 to 3 months we are seeing major power outages impact certain parts of the world. Matter of fact, the whole CrowdStrike situation was also included in that timeline. CrowdStrike, very ominous name, where computers with Windows all crashed, impacting businesses, banks, pharmacies, markets, and so forth. CrowdStrike being created and owned by the World Economic Forum. But we shouldn't be concerned about the World Economic Forum anymore, given the fact that the older guy had stepped down, and now we have this new guy in charge. So again, there's no more concern there, right? Right. Now, of course, I'm being sarcastic, but back to this power outage. What caused this major power outage that impacted all these people? Again, tens of millions. Well, reading this article from the Times, which was published today, they go on to say that the Portuguese grid operator said a rare atmospheric phenomenon in Spain had caused the massive outages across the peninsula. I just wonder if it's that pesky atmospheric gloom again. Remember the atmospheric gloom where news and media told us it had casted a shadow over the United Kingdom, blocking out sunlight for days, if not months. Yet come to find out it was actually scientists taking balloons, spraying things in the skies in a system called Satan. But anyway, I don't think they would ever lie to us again. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue reading this article. It goes on to say that a massive power blackout hit Spain and Portugal at midday on Monday, affecting tens of millions of people and bringing most of the two countries to a halt. The cuts paralyzed transport infrastructures, railway stations, airports, businesses, and buildings. Hospitals were forced to switch to backup generators. Telecommunication networks also crashed, causing disruption to major mobile phone services. Again, the article goes on to mention how a Portuguese grid operator said a rare atmospheric phenomenon took out the power in all these countries, but I'm reading through this article, they never explained what that atmospheric phenomenon was or how it caused this grid to go down. They're very vague about this atmospheric phenomenon. They just go on to say it's rare, and it has to be very rare given the fact how often do we hear of an atmospheric phenomenon taking down the grid in multiple countries in Europe. Maybe later in the day, they'll go into more details about this atmospheric phenomenon. I am making this video early in the morning. I just find it odd that they come out and say that, but they really don't go into any details. Matter of fact, right away, officials went into full deny and debunk mode. Like reading this article here from New York Times, which was published not too long after this had happened, they go on to say that officials did not say what caused the outage, which affected tens of millions of people across the peninsula, but several denied any foul play. They go on to quote Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, who wrote on Twitter, "At this point, there are no indications of any cyber attack." Portuguese energy authorities said the outage occurred following a disruption in the European grid, but did not provide any details. Now, after a report that an unspecified atmospheric phenomenon had caused the outage, REN, a Portuguese electricity and gas supplier, vigorously denied that was the reason. Yeah, something's going on here, and something inside my gut tells me it's not the weather or atmospheric phenomenon. This has caused a lot of chaos in Spain and Portugal, not so much France. France was barely impacted, and they were up and running, I think, a few moments later. But yeah, they are even telling people not to drive in Spain because all the traffic lights are currently out. And again, multiple news agencies are saying that so far they are still looking whether or not there was any cyber attacks. But as of right now, they are still expressing the fact that there are none. Because it's not an attack if it's happening from within and they're fully aware. Again, think of something like CrowdStrike. I don't know. I'm just not buying the excuse that it was a rare atmospheric phenomenon. I just can't help but feel that, and given my previous video, I just can't help but feel that we are in a test run, a test phase of the big one, the major power outage that will impact the entire world, where they just bring the entire grid down. They are also constantly showing us a great blackout in repetition in movies and TV shows. The Simpsons talking about when they had to go through a great blackout and had to write down everything by hand. We have Leave the World Behind. Then we had that other Netflix series with Robert De Niro that had to do with bringing the grid down, cyber attacks, and so forth. Even if they don't bring the grid down, even if there's no great power outage, it's always best to be stocked up for any emergency, for anything to arise, whether it's waters, non-perishable goods, things like that. Doing my homework, trying to do research, I'm going to other news websites talking about this atmospheric phenomenon, like this one here from skynews.com. They go on to say that the cause of the outage is unclear. Again, Portugal's grid operator blamed a rare atmospheric phenomenon that caused anomalous oscillations in high voltage power lines in Spain. Yet, Spain's grid operator has yet to respond to that or provide an update on the causes. Now, Portugal is over here trying to explain what happened over in Spain, and Spain is over here like, where did they get this information from? Because I would love to know. But continue to read this article. It goes on to say that, again, Spain's grid operator has yet to respond to that, but it's unlikely whatever caused the outage was a single localized event. A major power line going down can cause a large outage, as it did in 2021 when an interconnector between France and Spain failed, leaving 1 million people without power for a few hours in 2021, but it's unlikely to cause a system-wide failure of the kind we are seeing now. Matter of fact, they are saying this is one of the biggest power outages to impact Europe. While I was searching the other power outages that happen, like I said, they happen in a span of every 2 to 3 months, I was searching Puerto Rico's power outage that happened around the beginning of 2025. I don't remember the news really covering this story that happened a couple weeks ago, where in Puerto Rico, there was a massive power outage that left millions again in darkness. This article goes on to say, and I'm reading from ABC News, which was published on April 16th, Puerto Rico plunged into darkness again as island-wide blackout hits. The article goes on to say Puerto Rico suffers major power outage for a second time in 4 months. And again, I don't remember the news and media talking about this. Millions of people were without power for about 3 to 4 days. And I don't believe they even state what caused this power outage again in Puerto Rico. The entire island was without power, impacting the main international airport, hospitals, and hotels filled with Eastern vacationers. And around that midday Wednesday, 1.4 million customers were without electricity and more than 400,000 were without water. This is so crazy. This is so crazy to me. And going back to Europe, I just cannot believe they are blaming the weather, a rare weather phenomenon, which they do not expand upon. This story, this news story, has so many red flags. Like I said, I'm going through multiple news agencies, multiple websites talking about this rare weather phenomenon, and nobody's giving any details. Nobody's explaining. And again, Spain, they're not even confirming whether it was a rare weather phenomenon or not. It seems like they may be trying to gather up a story. But again, at the end of the day, I just feel like they are in a testing phase, whether it's a testing phase for a massive EMP, somehow to bring the grid down or what. This just seems like one giant test for something much bigger later on. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel, we are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. In this first disturbing video, in my most recent video, I included a segment about a gravedigger discovering that caskets were empty, that there were no bodies in the caskets. Now, in that video, I gave multiple examples, multiple news stories of what's being done with these bodies, whether they're being sold on the black market for experiments, food, and so forth. It's very disturbing, but check out this most recent news story.
And we start with developing news tonight. An Austin mortuary worker accused of experiments on corpses finds herself behind bars. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jennifer Sanders.
And I'm Daniel Marin. The suspect, Adeline Nanbin Bowie, faces charges of corpse abuse and tampering with government documents. KXAN's Brianna Hollis went through court records on the case.
According to these court documents, the suspect, who police say worked here at Capitol Mortuary Services, confirmed she used the limbs of corpses to study the effects of embalming fluid with and without formaldehyde. APD's investigation also uncovered she may have forged nearly 130 death certificates. A complaint from a former employee here to the Texas Funeral Services Commission sparked this investigation. He told investigators Bowie fraudulently used his name to complete and amend death certificates and that he was aware she was running, quote, experiments on corpses' limbs. The Texas Funeral Service Commission issued a cease and desist letter to Capitol Mortuary on April 10th, stating the facility does not have the right license to perform the embalmment testing outlined in the affidavit. The letter goes on to say, quote, it is a violation to allow the use of a dead human body by an embalming establishment for research or educational purposes unless it is done for a school or college. Bowie's arrest affidavit states medical training facility Med to Market in South Austin contracted with Capitol Mortuary for some transportation and cremation services, and that the company was aware of what Bowie was allegedly doing with the limbs, but denied any, quote, experimental testing. In a statement, Med to Market said it's aware of the allegations against a, quote, mortuary Med to Market is contracted with in performing its important work and mission. Bowie told police, according to her affidavit, that she guessed she experimented with about 15 bodies with permission from Med to Market and was updating the company on the outcomes. When police asked the Texas Funeral Service Commission if this was legal, the commission said no, because Capitol Mortuary is not licensed to perform this kind of work. Bowie's attorney says this case is complex and all of the pertinent details aren't yet apparent. According to online court records, Bowie is currently out on bond. In Austin, Brianna Hollis, KXAN News.
And the investigation includes MetaMarket and its leadership. A search warrant obtained by KXAN shows police want to go through a cell phone and iPad to possibly find evidence of communication between the suspect and MetaMarket related to these experiments. Well, just last week, a former Harvard Medical School morgue manager pleaded guilty after being accused of stealing and selling organs and other body parts from donated cadavers. That's according to Reuters. Cedric Lodge managed the morgue for more than 2 decades before his arrest 2 years ago. Prosecutors claim Lodge brought potential buyers to the school's morgue to pick out the body parts they wanted. Harvard says it plans to implement more oversight and
So yeah, these experiments on these bodies are not stopping. They are happening more than you think. And I highly doubt when it comes to this one story, it had to do with just embalming, because these bodies are being sold. They're being sold to black markets. And yes, they're being experimented on for multiple reasons.
Do y'all remember the dumping ground in Colorado? Right now, everybody is kind of focusing on what's going on in Arizona right now. And I think that's a good thing. And hopefully everything is working out for them. I still need to go check on some updates. But a couple of years ago in 2023 or 24, this guy had stumbled across a possible dumping ground out in the Colorado desert. Basically, he just walked around and showed us what he had been finding. And it was quite chilling because there were a lot of different pairs of shoes, all seemingly from different time periods. And a lot of people came out around that time saying, yeah, I think we have something here. But then it just kind of dropped off. As far as I know, the case is closed, but I don't know why. I don't know what the bottom line was. I don't know what conclusion anyone came to, but if anybody has any idea, please let me know.
That video is from Scare Bear Zero on TikTok. And no, I was not aware that somebody in Colorado, the Colorado desert, was finding all this stuff that was similar to what is currently happening in the Arizona desert. If you're not aware, there is a couple in Arizona, the Arizona desert. They're walking around and they're filming all these things they're finding on the ground. They're finding backpacks, children's clothes, children's shoes, women's clothing. They're also saying that they're finding bones and all sorts of stuff that connect right back to perhaps missing people. Now, we don't know 100% if this is connected to missing people, but they believe that they stumbled upon items that were left behind from people who have been trafficked. What's even crazier is the fact that I had to come back and re-edit this video, and I found out that TikTok completely removed their channel. Their channel is gone. I cannot find them anywhere on TikTok. Other people are saying as well that their channel had been deleted. So this raises a lot more suspicion. All their video footage that they have taken of this, it's either being deleted by TikTok or they're saying they're putting it on friends only because they believe they're now being targeted. A Cessna was hovering over their location, a truck was following them, and so forth, and now they are terrified. So it brings me back to this video footage in Colorado because as this TikTok post says, they say, I'm not sure how it ended. So are there any updates? Has anybody heard from this man again? There was also those kids that stumbled upon all those shoes inside that cave, and nobody's heard from them either. There's never been any updates. And it really makes you wonder how many locations across the United States are just dumping grounds, like these lakes, like Lady Bird Lake, how every so often bodies will appear. And there are so many rituals conducted in these deserts, even going all the way back to the 1920s, 1930s, I believe. We had Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Walt Disney going to a desert in New Mexico and performing these dark rituals, saying that they were summoning these entities and so forth. And I have no doubt whatsoever that a lot of these rituals are still carried out today. In this next segment, remember that video I did a couple days ago about how the United Kingdom, they are trying to dim the sun. And I said, well, there are currently locations in the United Kingdom that have said that they have gone days or even months without sunlight. So if anything, there are locations in the United Kingdom that actually need sunlight. But they said that they were blaming this lack of sunlight on something called a anticyclonic gloom. I remember some of us, we were like, what in the world is an anticyclonic gloom? But there were some people that were saying, oh yes, the old anticyclonic gloom. I remember my Meemaw used to sit me on her knee and tell me other days that the old anticyclonic gloom would just ravage her village. So yes, that's what was being blamed for the lack of sunlight in the United Kingdom. But hold up, it looks like it was actually Satan that caused the lack of sunlight in the United Kingdom. Yes, Satan, or what's also known as the stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation. Now, they could have called it the stratospheric nucleation aerosol transport, but then again, they want to be able to make an homage to their god. So what is Satan? Reading this article from MIT Technology last September, and this article came out back in 2023, researchers in the United Kingdom launched a high-altitude weather balloon that released a few hundred grams of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, a potential scientific first in the solar geoengineering field. Yes, I am sure this is the very first time they've ever done this, just like the article that just came out that I covered on my most recent video, how that will be also the very first time they are going to spray things in the skies to dim the sun. With a price tag of $66 million, isn't that such interesting numerology? But get this article goes on to say that solar geoengineering is the theory that humans can ease global warming by deliberately reflecting more sunlight into space. One possible means is spraying sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere in an effort to mimic a cooling effect that occurs in the aftermath of major volcanic eruptions. It is highly controversial given concerns about potential unintended consequences, among other issues. But I thought them spraying things in the skies was just a kooky, crazy conspiracy theory that us Diet Coke bleach drinking with a lemon twist conspiracy theorists come up with. The article goes on to say that the United Kingdom effort was not a test of or experiment in geoengineering itself. Rather, the stated goal was to evaluate a low-cost, controllable, recoverable balloon system according to details obtained by MIT Technology Review. Such a system could be used for small-scale geoengineering research efforts, or perhaps for an eventual distributed geoengineering deployment involving numerous balloons. My thing is, couldn't you have tested the quality of these balloons without having to actually spray things into the skies? Because if you're spraying sulfur dioxide into the skies like you said you were doing, then you were not just testing the quality of these balloons in a balloon system called Satan. This reminds me of that balloon that was flying over the United States between January 28th and February 4th, 2023, that they shot down, and they claimed that this balloon belonged to China. But come to find out, it came out later that a lot of these parts inside this balloon came from the United States. Matter of fact, a couple of days ago, there was an individual who found a very mysterious balloon that was traveling across the United States. Now, he says it may have been a hot air balloon, but what if it wasn't? What if it's some kind of balloon that's spraying things in the skies?
I don't understand how nobody's talking about this. I spotted this yesterday, but there is a hot air balloon that has traveled from South Dakota and is almost to the Bahamas.
Scroll down on the left.
It is a balloon. This is what it is. It doesn't tell me where it's from, but it says it's at 62,000 feet, and it has been at that the entire way because it shows it by color. So it's like this is where it started getting really high, and then it just stayed that high all the way across the entire United States. I spotted it yesterday whenever it was over here in this area, and now it is the middle of the ocean.
Now, I don't know if these balloons, and yes, I say balloons because people have spotted others, are actually spraying things in the skies or they serve some other purpose, but I just cannot buy the fact that the United Kingdom, they're the only ones doing some solar engineering with a balloon system called Satan. The ultimate goal here is not for the climate. It's basically to destroy crops, destroy the farmland, destroy food, destroy bees and other animals, other wildlife. Because at the end of the day, it's all about control. That is why I highly doubt it's just the United Kingdom doing some solar engineering over their locations.
We've got some absolutely amazing footage coming from a user called A-Wizzle, a helicopter chasing a orb UFO, and he captured this in real time. He's absolutely perplexed. This helicopter was actively pursuing this object, right? Orb in nature, right? I'm going to put the full video at the end so you guys can listen to it and go check out A-Wizzle as well, because this is absolutely mind-blowing. But if we put this into a reference into what other people have seen over the years, I guess, this is something that we have kind of been privy to. We see a lot of craft pursuing these objects? Are they researching them? Are they trying to figure out what they are or what is going on? But there's so many sort of like vehicles that aren't even showing up on flight radar doing this sort of behavior. So I don't know, man. Check out this clip now and listen.
Yo, that is a freaking orb. That's an orb being chased by a helicopter. What the hell? That is a straight up orb, dude. Being followed by a freaking helicopter. What the hell? I just now pulled up. Smells like something's burning. That is nuts.
That video comes from Interstellar Discussion on TikTok, and I still strongly feel that the drones were a distraction away from the orbs, that the drones were military or, you know, something else in nature, and they're being used to look here, don't look at this. Or what if, and we can't take this off the table either, this helicopter is projecting this orb?
The distractions are going absolutely wild right now. More humiliation coming. So we'll start with on the ground first with these celebrities, and then we'll go to the sky. Shannon Sharp has been their go-to lately, and I really wonder what team he's on. Do y'all think it was really an accident when he went live doing that certain stuff a couple months back? It wasn't. It was distracting you, just like now the lawsuit that's coming out. These people genuinely all know each other. Him, the OnlyFans people, all of them. But there's a lot of big things going on, and that's why they're distracting you. It's that time of year again for Will Smith. It's the humiliation scenario. You get what I'm saying? Why in the world would he do stuff like this on his own free will? You get it, Will? Nobody in their right mind's doing that for no reason. This one's crazy because you know who this is, right? And who is this? Oh, it's David Beckham. Where is he at these days? Wake up. It's a club and you are not in it. And most of the people are all in the same club. They just act like they're not. And I really hate to say it that way, but think about it. Why would him or nobody else speak up when this stuff was going on? But what exactly are they distracting us from? Oh, that's right. The bigger distraction. Look where this was happening. That's weird, right? Y'all know what just happened here, right? And allegedly, these things are coming back. They have all been warning you this whole year. Part of their job is to make sure that you know what's coming subconsciously.
This is so true. We are, in that video is from Moon Henry on TikTok. And I just feel like we are now in a big season of distractions. All these very bizarre and odd stories happening around the same time. The Pope passing away, the leader or the chairman of the World Economic Forum stepping down. We have all these bizarre plane stories. And at the same time, there's all these very, very bizarre stories involving these celebrities, especially like Kanye West with all these stories about his cousin and so forth. We are just in a big season of distractions.
You haven't heard yet, a third mysterious shipping container has popped up, this time in a farmer's field here in the States. And farmer goes out to this refrigerated container again, and it's also not locked. The crazy thing about, well, actually it's all crazy, but the first crazy thing he notices about this is that there are no lines. Like there are no from it being wheeled in or rolling in or being drug in. Like there's no grass or anything disturbed. So he assumes, and I kind of do too now that I'm thinking about it, that this was airdropped. This container had been airdropped there specifically. Okay. Also, like I said, the container was not locked. He was able to open it. He goes inside of it. And not only is there more chicken in there, but there's also buckets and containers filled with loose liquid chemicals. Like there's no lids on them. He doesn't know what the chemical is. He said he thought it looked like bleach, but we can't confirm it because his video has been taken down. We don't know if he took it down or if TikTok took it down or for some reason he got spooked and took it down, but it's down. So we can't ask any questions. I mean, this is the third one in less than a month. Now, if you've been following along, there was a gentleman, I think he said he was somewhere in the South, popped up right outside of his house. Now, this was on the tracks. It was a train cargo container. Also had a freezer on it running. He wouldn't open it. Good for him. Like, immediately, I feel like you would get arrested or something. The one before that washed up on shore. So you got ships in water dropping off containers. You got containers being airdropped from planes or helicopters onto a man's farm land. And then you got one rolling in on the tracks. What's next? What's next? Chicken again, too? There's no such thing as a free lunch, my boy.
TikTok has been going really overboard lately, deleting a lot of videos. When it came to that couple finding those items in the Arizona desert, they had deleted a lot of their videos. I saw some that were, had a lot of information and a lot of things they captured on camera that are no longer there. That video was from NJ Castle, and these containers are really popping up all over the place, unlocked, full of items, full of food for people to eat. And so I'm sure they don't want this spreading around and want us talking about it the more they pop up. That video you just saw was from Paulo TikTok Official, and the 2012 Olympics will never cease to amaze me. Like, every time I see video footage of it, I think to myself, how can people look at this, even right down to the dancers, and say to themselves, this was all just one big coincidence? Then we take a look at the 2024 Olympics, and everybody saw the symbology, the imagery. And then when it came to the closing ceremony, they were showing us portals. Things crossing over from portals, the Golden Voyagers, these gray entities. What are we hearing today? Portal this, portal that. Look, a portal in the sky. No, that's SpaceX. A portal being erected in Michigan, in New York. And then we had the Pope opening up 5 holy sacred portals. And now we have the most expensive AI program ever in Texas called Project Stargate, or essentially Project Portal. So if back in 2012, they were telling us what was going to happen ahead of time, and that event just encompassed the entire world, I just wonder what's going to happen when it comes to these portals.
I'm a retired FBI agent, and this is a conspiracy theory that keeps me up at night. In 2018, a treasure hunter tipped off the FBI to a large cache of buried, stolen Civil War gold in a rural part of Elk County, Pennsylvania. Now, the story goes, this treasure hunter had been looking into this since around 2011, probably further back than that. But his research showed that during the Civil War, a secret society known as the Knights of the Golden Circle a group that operated in the north to sabotage the northern efforts. One of them being to steal this gold that was on its way to the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia and then hide it. Why they never went back for it, I don't know. This treasure hunter had been operating or doing his research and looking for this stuff, and he located a site that was on public land in Pennsylvania. And he was operating under the permission of the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. It's somewhere along the way, this treasure hunter and the DCNR had a falling out, and he follows this up and goes to the FBI. He told them, or however he convinced them, they took it seriously enough to hire an outside agency to go in and do some very high-tech survey of the property to see if there's any validity to this. And sure enough, this high-tech equipment revealed that there was a large mass of some kind at this site underground. And then the FBI, also using pretty high-tech equipment, determined that there was the presence of gold. They end up getting a seizure warrant through a federal judge. They get a writ of entry that gives them access to the land. They do a 3-day search for this using an excavator and all kinds of techniques, to try to locate this stuff. Very well documented, I have to say, very thoroughly documented. And they found nothing. No sign of Civil War gold, no sign that anything had been buried there. Now, currently ongoing, there's a lawsuit between this treasure hunter and the FBI. He claims that they did find something and that there's video evidence of this. I don't understand why the site survey shows presence of gold, a large mass under the ground, and then they find absolutely nothing. So stay tuned, and I'm going to fill you in on this one completely because it really, really interests me. I'm a retired FBI agent, and this is part 2 of a conspiracy theory that is still keeping me up at night. Over 2 million of you have watched my video on the FBI's search for stolen Civil War gold in rural Pennsylvania. And I got some new information on that really, really is troubling me about this case. So one of the things that many people that live, residents in the area near this, where this gold is, have said that the FBI works all night, that they had this equipment going all night long. Well, possibly what that could have been was it was cold. They probably had heat, had generators out there to keep the tents warm that they were in. They had to maintain this property for the full 3 days, because once a search warrant is begun, the government technically owns that property. They have command and control of it. So they had to keep people out there 24/7 for this. That's not unusual. That's pretty normal procedure as well. However, some of the witnesses say that they were digging all night. So there's a difference between the sound of digging equipment and generators. Okay, so that's first off, that's a little funky. But let's just say that it was generators. Let's throw that aside. The other thing that the witnesses all said was that the FBI brought in on the second day, brought in armored cars. So what is that? What is an armored car? What do you mean by that? Could that be like a MRAP type military vehicle or a Humvee? Or the more typical standard armored car that you see going to a bank to pick up cash or take cash to a bank or a casino, that kind of thing. So that was my question. I wanted to determine what they meant by armored car. And according to the witnesses who were shown photographs of various types of vehicles, they identified a standard armored car that you go to a bank, that you see where cash is, that is carried in when they take to a bank. So in 29 years in the FBI, I was in 3 field offices over that time frame. Never once did I ever see the FBI having need, use, or ownership of an armored car. It's just something that never arose. There was no need for it. We weren't in the business of that stuff. So when I started hearing this, and coupled with the fact that they claimed that there was no gold found, nothing found, then why do you need to bring in armored cars? In fact, a couple of witnesses even indicated that the armored cars coming out of there looked like they were heavily laden, like they were riding low. And they had closed off streets in that so that these armored cars could get through there. If they didn't find anything, why do you need to do that? If it's just your equipment you have up there to do this digging, there's nothing about that. So that really, really troubles me. But then when you ask the real question is, well, the FBI had 25, 30 people maybe there. I don't know the exact number of people they had on scene. All of them would have to be in on this. And what would be the purpose? I mean, the government owns that gold. The FBI is the government. Why would they take this? There's still a lot of questions on this that are really, really troubling to me. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this thing. I'm going to stick with it.
Now, I think we all know what that treasure hunter's first mistake was. I don't even need to say it. I think we all know what his first mistake was, but this is really eerie. This also kind of reminds me of the gold in Fort Knox. Weren't we supposed to get some information about the gold in Fort Knox? And it seems like that was completely swept under the rug. If they didn't want to investigate it, if they didn't want to tell us where the gold is, or if there's still any gold in Fort Knox, why even bring it to our attention in the first place? There are certain rules when it comes to certain states, when it comes to finding lost items or lost gold. In Pennsylvania, you can keep the gold that you find unless the true owners come and claim it. And given the fact that the true owners have all passed away, they're all gone, technically it's the treasure hunters.
Kofi, follow me.